welcome. I'm pleased to be the host, very nominal host, of this panel on careers in real estate law. And we have two wonderful guests here to tell us all about their careers and their experiences, and then take some of your questions. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to our panelists. And so I'm just going to give you a brief introduction and then let them go to it. So to start off, we have Brian Murray, who is a partner in Cullen and Dykman Bleakley Platt, which is a law firm with offices in Brooklyn as well as two other New York locations. And he represents clients in commercial real estate transactions. He also advises financial institutions. He's dealt with co-ops and condos, leasing, purchasing, and sale of real estate. I'll tell you all about that area of practice. He's a graduate of St. John's University School of Law, and we're all very glad to have him here joining us. And our second speaker will be Alex Abitable from the Enterprise Foundation. And before that, he worked in a few firms and was a solo practitioner for many years. Now he's working with the Enterprise Foundation, which represents entities involved in New York City programs dealing with affordable housing. And this is basically real estate practice, closing title transfers, doing construction loan closings, and all the various real estate work that the Enterprise Foundation needs. So without further ado, let's start with Brian Murray.
Thank you, Professor. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. As the Professor mentioned, I'm a partner with the law firm of Cullen and Dykman Bleakley Platt. We are a firm with strong Brooklyn roots. We were founded here in 1850. We were the firm that was involved in representing the builders of the Brooklyn Bridge, and we were able to represent the organization that celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Brooklyn Bridge several years ago. So we really feel very strongly about having Brooklyn roots, and it's a real pleasure to be here at Brooklyn Law School with you. Our firm, we actually have a new name to our firm as of January 1st of this year, Cullen and Dykman Bleakley Platt, which resulted from the merger of Cullen and Dykman, which was the old Brooklyn firm, with Bleakley Platt, Remsen, Millen, and Curran, which is a Manhattan-based firm. It's been a terrific merger for us because it gives us an office in Manhattan, which we haven't had for a number of years. We now have offices on Montague Street, out in Garden City, and now also at 44 Wall Street. So it's been a terrific merger for us, and things seem to be going pretty well for us, fortunately. I've been with the firm 10 years now. It seems hard to believe. I feel like I'm just a little bit out of law school myself, but I guess I do qualify as an experienced person now to be speaking to you. I joined the firm right out of law school, and I noticed that one of the questions they asked me to address was, how you decided on a career in real estate. I'm happy to speak to you about that process because I think, maybe I'm not as typical as some other people in the field who went to law school knowing that that was a field they were interested in, or discovered it, soon afterwards and decided to pursue a career. I really had no idea about transactional work or real estate work, and really spent my entire law school career geared towards litigation. Participated in moot court, was on a team that won a national moot court competition. Every elective I took was litigation related, or I was also interested in trust and estates to some degree, so I hadn't had any real estate training at all besides the typical Property 1 and Property 2 classes in my first year of law school. But when I came out of law school in 1993, it was a market probably similar to the one that many of you will be facing now, not the strongest job market. So I made a decision after about 2 or 3 months after the bar exam that it was better to eat and have a job than not to, and decided to accept a job in our residential real estate practice. Now that's an important practice area of our firm. We do an extremely high volume of residential real estate closings. On a typical busy day at the end of the month, we're probably doing over 100 real estate closings in our offices, in our 3 or 4 offices throughout the New York area. So it's an extremely busy practice area. Now when I say residential real estate closings, what we're doing is representing the banks. And that's generally what I do on the commercial side as well. And what I think you need to consider is that real estate has a lot of broad components to it, and can have application in many different areas of practice. I think probably many of you think, when you think of real estate, you think of representing the buyer or the seller, and that's obviously a big part of it. But when you have institutional clients and financial institutions, one of the things that's a large part of our practice is representing the bank. Generally in New York, when you have a real estate finance transaction, there are going to be three sets of attorneys, or three attorneys: the buyer's attorney, the seller's attorney, and also the bank's attorney. And that's what we do. Then you also have a large number of refinance transactions where the owner of the building is seeking to take out some of the equity in their property, and so they'll go to the bank, and particularly in this interest rate environment, it's very attractive. It's a very attractive way for companies to finance expansion or other expenses that they might have, is to refinance their buildings. And they may have had a loan that has been on the books for 3 or 4 years, and they're paying maybe 8-9% interest, and now can get a loan at 6% or even lower. So it's the very same way people are doing it with their homes. Businesses are also tending to do the same thing. So refinances are an important part of our business as well. But my point is, just going back to how I found the field of real estate, I would just encourage you to approach your job search with an open mind. As I said, I had never really considered transactional work, and I think probably that's part of the law school experience. We tend to concentrate on the courtroom scenario or litigation and those type of fields, and you don't necessarily think about the day-to-day transactional work, and it can be very interesting, and it's an important part of what keeps commerce moving. And as I said, I would suggest that you be open to that. And once I started in the field, I decided, this is something that I would really like to continue, and I did that. And what I did was then move from the residential side of things, which, again, it's a great learning process, because basically the concepts with residential real estate and commercial real estate are the same. Just obviously, the issues become a little more complicated, and the dollar figures get larger. But the concepts, in terms of clear title to property, exceptions in a title report, things like that, are all the same. So it was an excellent training ground to start out in our residential practice and then move to the commercial side. I guess in terms of other areas of real estate that our firm is involved in, since a large number of our clients are financial institutions, our job is to service them on whatever needs they have. So we have our litigation department that does that, but our real estate and banking group, we have people that represent the bank when they're lending money to people. Obviously, banks need branches to do their business in, so we do a lot of leasing work, and also, most banks these days tend to prefer to lease their branches as opposed to buying and selling them. So we do a lot of leasing work for our financial institution clients, and that doesn't really, of course, that's not restricted only to financial institutions. When you think about it, any business, any corporate scenario, people need a place to do their business. So, you're going to run into real estate sooner or later with any kind of commercial client, because they're going to need some help and representation in finding a place to do their business. Real estate is a field that, even if you're not going to be concentrating for that in your career, it's something that really makes sense for you to learn, to at least be able to be somewhat adept at it. If nothing else, I guarantee you, as a lawyer, sooner or later, one of your relatives is going to ask for help in buying or selling their home or refinancing their home. So it's something that really makes sense for you to at least have somewhat of a handle on. What I think is interesting about real estate is that it tends to be, not to say that it's always friendly, but it's obviously less adversarial than litigation. So, the environment tends to be a little bit more pleasant. Basically speaking, you have a situation where the bank wants to make this loan, the borrower obviously wants to get this loan so they can either buy the property or take the equity out. So people are kind of working towards a common goal. Now the flip side of that is something that we do, and I expect we'll be doing more of it unless the economy turns around, and that's our foreclosure practice. That's the flip side. No one likes to really say that it's a field that we love, but the fact is it's something that we need to do for our clients as well. And so that's what happens when a loan goes bad, and we need to help the bank recover on its loan. We will start the foreclosure process, and that's a litigation process that obviously is not as pleasant, as the closing process. So, there are a lot of different facets to real estate. I know that this is a meeting of the Environmental Law Society. In recent years, environmental issues have become much more important in terms of real estate. Obviously, there are liability issues in terms of a buyer, who's taking property is obviously these days going to be more concerned than ever as to what the environmental condition is on the property. We would counsel most buyers on property to, at least do some kind of environmental analysis to make sure that there are no problems associated with the property. And one of the things obviously you want to do is find out, well, how has this property been used in the past? If you're talking about an office building that's been used as an office building since it was built, well, then your risks are somewhat minimal. However, if you're talking about a client who wants to build a bank branch on the site of a former gas station where the oil tanks were buried in the ground, then those issues obviously are much more, going to be much more of a concern to you. So, there is definitely an environmental aspect to real estate that I would say has become more of a concern, than ever in recent years. In my practice representing lenders, the lender is always concerned about what liability, the bank may have in terms of, making the loan, and then we're finding out that there's an environmental issue. So, obviously, that's something the banks are concerned about. Generally speaking, when the bank makes a loan of any size on commercial real estate, they'll require what's known as a Phase 1 environmental survey, which is a search and a report that's prepared by environmental consultants, which will prepare maps and show, where this property is in relation to any other environmental hazard sites. We'll also research on the past use of the property to find out if there are any risks associated. They'll take things like soil samples, that type of thing. If a bank gets a report that they're not happy with on what's called the Phase 1, they can insist on a further investigation known as a Phase 2, which is a more in-depth study. It's not something that makes a borrower happy because it's a substantial expense, but if the bank has reason to believe that there's significant risk, they will require that Phase 2 environmental study. So, as I said, in terms of I kind of fell into the real estate field, but it's been a practice that really has been very interesting and had a lot of different areas in which I can concentrate in representing financial institutions. And I think if when you realize representing any kind of corporate or institutional clients, real estate is going to come up sooner or later at some point. So it's something that even if it's not something you want to concentrate on, it's certainly something you should consider exposure to. I'll let Alex make his presentation, and then if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Before we bring them up here, I want to mention that this is our own Alex Apatople, graduate of Brooklyn Law School. So welcome again.
Speaking of Brooklyn roots, I was within walking distance from the spot is where I was born, where I grew up, and where I presently live. For the first 14 years of my life, I lived on Carroll Street near Columbia. For the past 14 years, not the last, past 14 years, I lived in this neighborhood, first on Smith and Bergen, now in Atlantic and Bond. Graduate from Brooklyn Law School, class of 1982. 9 years before I walked through those doors in September of 1979, I've been involved in real estate, housing, those types of issues. 1970, I was a college student. I went to Buffalo to work for a summer, and I worked for the fellow who was in charge of urban involvement at Mises College, and he asked me to do a study on what was happening in housing in Buffalo. So I produced a study called Wanted, Low-Income Housing in Buffalo, or something like that. I think 2 people had read it, me and the fellow I did it for. Then I finished college. One summer of '72, I was in Chicago as a community organizer out of the Linsky Institute. There were housing issues and other community-based issues. And then in '73, I went back to Buffalo. I worked with a fellow who was working with homeowners in the inner city. The law student had done a study and found that houses in the inner city were overassessed. effectively, the home buyers there paying higher rate of taxes than other homeowners in other communities. So we would go around to homeowners and educate them as to why they're paying too much in taxes. That led to the beginning of a community organization there. It was called Ellicott District Concerned Tax Credits. It's made up of principally homeowners, mostly black, mostly older people who survived the Depression. Many of them were in their 50s and their 60s. And we started off with a lawsuit against the city because when we protested their taxes, we went through an administrative proceeding, the results were very poor. So we retained an attorney, wrote a lawsuit, and we won. And that was the basis for us to organize among the other homeowners in that neighborhood. We began then to focus on other issues, community improvement, better sanitation pickup. Also, these were homeowners, so they had trouble with their tenants. And so they worked with their tenants to be more responsible. I gotta tell you, so I was there from 74 to 76. It was very surprising for the city officials to come into a meeting of largely African-American homeowners and being told, we want clean streets, we want this, we want that. And we will work with you to see that's done. And we had excellent attention from the city officials. We would have meetings with the mayor, then it was Stanley Mikowski, every 3 or 4 months. So we could bring to him the problems we're encountering and the kind of responses we're getting from those different agencies. While I was there, I learned more and more about real estate. I took a broker's course, and not that I became a broker, just to learn about it. It really was similar to the real estate practice course I took here from Professor Meehan. When I came here, I knew basic real estate from my experience. Even after I worked in Buffalo, with NYU, got a master's in public administration, but after learning on the run, I wanted to learn in a more systematic basis. I took all the housing courses. I got to work with some of the professors. I did some research in mortgage lending. At that time, in the late 70s, redlining was a big issue. The banking department had a number of studies done. I worked on a number of those studies. And there was a big effort toward improving lending practices. The year before I came here, I worked with several NYU professors on a HUD study on reducing mortgage risk. We looked at different lenders in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Boston, to see what were they doing to reduce the risk to them, and what can be replicated by other lenders to encourage them to lend in areas where they tended not to lend. And looking at it so many years later, the fruits of that kind of view, not necessarily all study, but analysis by lenders, that kind of thing has, today, redlining in terms of lending is barely an issue, at least as far as I can see. I came here, I took a real estate course, Professor Meehan, real estate practice, real estate finance, and fit adjunct. Anyways, if I remember, what sitting in class, we would rattle off FHA, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae. No one knew what they meant, but I knew what the acronyms. I dealt with them already in graduate school and my work. Out of my contacts at NYU, I was hooked up with a small law firm that represented a lot of community-based organizations. They're still around today. Fifth Avenue Committee, Los Sodas in Williamsburg, Natty Kelly, which had some problems recently. They're in the South Bronx, and other HCC on the West Side. And we did a lot of community development, affordable housing projects. If you go to Warren Street between 4th and 5th Avenue, Fifth Avenue Committee Rehab, 12 houses on that block. I was involved in putting that deal together and doing individual closings. I was with that firm for a couple of years and went to another firm that was a real estate boutique, 25 attorneys that represented the real estate investment arm of Morgan Stanley, Tishman Realty and Development, and Lazar Freres. And we did some major developments, including large condominiums. I was essentially hired to do some condo plans because I become very familiar with corporate condo conversion, that aspect of the practice. In 1988, I started my own practice. The firm I was with merged with a national firm that had 250 attorneys in Boston, Phoenix, San Francisco, the size of New York. I didn't like what I saw there, and so I went for my own. 4 years later, the firm declared bankruptcy and out of business. I practiced solo for 3 years in Manhattan, 6 years on Montague Street, and then for 4 years over on Atlantic Avenue. My practice concentrated in real estate. One thing I want to say, in the early 90s, when the market was very, very soft, you had the RTC situation, banks going out of business, serious problems with bankruptcies and foreclosures. I was fortunate because I had a good base in real estate, and I did commercial leasing, I did apartment condo work, a lot of development work. So attorneys who did had a real estate practice and concentrated on house closings were starving. Because I had a broad base in basic real estate law and had experience across the board, also in real estate and property tax procedures, even with some zoning work, I stayed in business and I did pretty well. I had a lot of developers who tapped into city programs. I assisted them. I developed a reputation where referrals would come from people who work for the city, from the Attorney General's office, from my divorcement plans. And then one day I ran into in City Hall Park a college classmate of mine, a fellow named Bill Fry, who founded the New York office of the Enterprise Foundation. He said to me, the city's asking us to get involved in this program. We're going to call it the City Home Program. It's going to be rehabbing smaller houses for sale to people within the particular income bracket. We don't have any local council. If you're interested in doing it, so sure, it's right up my alley. Similar to what I did Fifth Avenue Committee and some other clients 2 years. So at the beginning of '91, I really became the outside counsel for the Enterprise Foundation in New York. And as part of the City Home Program, at the very tail end of the program now, we must have rehabbed more than 500 houses. We did 4 condo developments of a total of about 75 units. We did a limited equity co-op in the South Bronx of 40 units, and so on. And then what happened in 2001, excuse me, the city program called the Neighborhood Entrepreneur Program, we call it NEP. It had been run by the New York City Housing Partnership. It entails clustering of city-owned property, apartment buildings that would be turned over to be managed by local entrepreneurs, hence the Neighborhood Entrepreneur Program. They would manage them, and they would arrange for a construction loan, and then at the end of construction was completed, the construction loan would be paid off by both low-income housing tax credit investments and by a loan from the city. Keep the rents low and affordable to people who were living there and people in the neighborhood. The housing partnership decided for whatever reason they no longer wanted to do this program. They asked Enterprise if they were interested in doing it. We went through some they retained me to do due diligence, whether they should take over the program. They said, well, we need you to represent this if you do take it over. I said, I would never do it as a sole practitioner. I have to hire additional attorneys and staff, and I don't want to do that. So we worked out a deal, so I went in-house. This is as of October 2001. But in the meantime, my practice was representing developers, small developments, some of them city-related, some of them not. People buying and selling properties, people buying and selling businesses, board-based, basically real estate, somewhat sophisticated real estate practice. At the Enterprise Foundation, I'm a staff attorney. Let me quickly tell you something about the foundation. It was founded 21 years ago. Last year we celebrated its 20th anniversary. The founder is James Rouse and his wife Patty. James Rouse, well, he was a private developer, developed South Street Seaport, Faneuil Hall at Quincy Market in Boston, Harbor Place in Baltimore, and of the similar type of harbor developments. He built Columbia, Maryland, which is a new city. The city was built from scratch. Our headquarters are in Columbia. We have offices besides in New York City, small office in Rochester, office in Baltimore, D.C., Atlanta, Cleveland, New Orleans, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, Denver, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, and maybe a few other places. The headquarters are in Boston. Our legal department consists of 5 attorneys, 4 in Columbia, and me in New York. New York has enough business that it really needed to have in-house counsel on the spot. That's me. Besides the NEP program, we control the entity that owns these properties during rehab. We have our offices, Toilet Corporation, we contract with contractors to do the rehab, and we have an agreement with the entrepreneur to to manage and oversee the development of properties. That's one program we have. We also are a lender through our lending arm, Enterprise Housing Financial Services, Inc. We make loans principally to community-based organizations that are basically housing-oriented. Although we also have, besides housing, emphasize child care, neighborhood safety, and employment. Our biggest focus is real estate and housing. I mentioned the COM program before. I also mentioned the lending, some to community-based organizations, some for construction loans, and some sizable loans. We closed a loan last month as part of the 203K program that the city's overseeing together with HUD of $2 million. We had closed another loan of $1.7 million in December, and a couple of sizable loans of that nature down the pike. They also do some general corporate work and whatever else comes up. But in terms of just sort of went into how I got into real estate, I was interested, being a child of the 60s, I was interested in social justice and trying to figure out the means by which I can help society in a way I can. And housing work was my entree into that. And I'm fortunate today to be able to continue doing that, even though I'm middle-aged and chubby. And I also explained how I came to be employed. And the three questions that in our agenda for today: why we opted for a career in real estate, how we came to be employed, and how we feel about our job. I find a fair amount of satisfaction in the work that I do. You'll see as you get into practice that after about 7 years, you begin looking for something else, or wishing you were doing something else. But whatever you do, it's work. You come down to it. There's always an aspect of it that's work, an aspect of it that's enjoyable. You kind of get satisfaction from it. You just got to see the balance from it. No matter what you do, there's also a certain amount of tedium. You just can't avoid it. That's what I have to say.
Anybody have any questions?
Question primarily for you. It doesn't really relate to real estate loans. We rarely ever hear from any solo practitioners and things like this. I'm just interested to hear about the challenges you faced in becoming a solo practitioner.
The key is have a niche to develop a client base. I was fortunate, although I was at a larger firm for those 3 years, contacts I had made during my first 3 years of practice in a small firm stayed with me. And when I saw the writing on the wall, I began to consider moving on. I saw headhunters and considering going to other firms. I was not that comfortable with that either. So a couple of my former clients said to me, we have some substantial deals coming up, and if you're available, we'd like you to represent us. So I really took a leap of faith, but I had people who were afraid to retain me. And from that, I developed most of my referral. I used to advertise my first open practice, but the only kind of calls I would get from advertising was from other advertisers. So it really did not generate any business at all. But really, the contacts that you make through clients and through other people you deal with is really the main source of my business. One client I had at the big firm, he went off to work for a Dutch bank. And so it happened, I was at one of these conferences, and I saw a fellow I had lots of dealings with, friendly with. He said, oh, I have lunch today with Billy. So it's with my regards. Next day, the fellow called me and says, we're a Dutch bank, they made a lot of bad loans, they own a lot of properties now, not paying to the zoo for legal fees, we're looking for a sole practitioner to represent us. Are you interested? So sure. And what I did was, speaking for the five, one of our tenants, 1090 West Street. I did, for 3 or 4 years, the firm's inaugural investment stupid. Must have been about 70,000 square feet worth of leasing commercial space. They own hundreds of apartment condo apartments. There's a score of clothing stores. They had taken over a condo development that was in the middle of construction, finished construction, completed the offering. I did that transaction for them. And it was a major client of mine for 4 years. As I found, it's almost was the other night, Kramer was talking about even Stephen. I would lose a major client and I get another one in return. And that always happened. And because of, really, one of the main reasons why I went to Enterprise was I was a victim of my own success. I was too busy. I could not handle the business that I had. I didn't want to bulk up, but now I lost control over the quality of the work. You know, I would hire an attorney and assistant. And I just manage one or two assistants, but beyond that, I got a little hairy. So I got tired also of working 6 or 7 days a week. So I wanted to sort of regulate my life. I remember when I went there, someone assumed that I was coming and I was making more money. I said, no. I'm walking away from at least $1.5 million in the next 10 years. It's at a minimum. But I'm trading it in for quality of life. I said, I'll live 10 years longer. I also said, they are retired, get hit by a bus. But, you know, you have trade-offs.
You know, if I could just add something to that, the issue of contacts is important whether you're in a large firm scenario or a solo practitioner. You know, for myself, working with financial institutions, being in a law firm and a partner in a law firm, one of the big emphasis all the time is client development and new business development. But how many of us can really bring in a new bank? You know, how many know someone at a bank that we're not representing? But what happens is, I'll be representing someone or representing a bank and be dealing with a vice president or a senior vice president for a number of years at a bank. Well, all of a sudden we'll hear one day that this person is leaving the bank. And at first we think, uh-oh, what does that mean for us? But hopefully we're entrenched enough to know to continue representing that bank with the business that they've given us, and we'll know the other people who are staying. But the good news when someone leaves and moves is, hey, where are they going, and can we get an in with that bank? So again, a lot of it is the personal contacts that you've made, and we've gotten a lot of new business when people pick up and move to a bank that we're not currently representing, because we consider that as fertile ground for trying to develop new business from another bank like that. So I can't overestimate the importance of the personal aspect of keeping contacts and keeping personal relationships up and following people and keeping track of where they go, because you never know where new business is going to come from.
Relationships are very important, and also competence. A lot of times competence is what establishes relationships. I find being involved in transactional real estate, title companies know you and respect your abilities and your trustworthiness. They will accommodate you when need be. And it's just very important. If anyone finds they can't trust you, they'll never trust you. If they find that you're reliable, you know what you're doing, they will thoroughly trust you. And I always say to our people always try to serve. The home buyers, the tenants, they don't care that we're making no money. They don't care that we're not in profit. They want a roof over their heads, don't leak. They want heat, they want hot water. They don't care if you're not making any money. They want, if you're not able to deliver, as you say you're going to deliver, if you're not confident in what you're saying that you're setting out to do, you don't do it. And that's true for whatever you do, and whether you're working for the not-for-profit field or for the for-profit development. And I just want to mention, in the write-up, categorizing the Enterprise Foundation as public interest is not sort of a misnomer. I would categorize us as the not-for-profit sector, not really public interest. I don't know what that is.
This question is addressed to both speakers. What courses do you think are, say, mandatory for anybody that's interested in a career in real estate law, especially for first years that are here?
Well, obviously, I would think property is required, right? Is that a two-semester course or one? One, okay. And then I would also recommend a UCC course. I don't know if that's an optional course. I didn't take it in law school, and I'm kind of sorry I didn't.
Secure transactions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I would say those are, definitely must-takes.
Real estate practice, real estate financing, corporations. You have to understand entities and corporations, limited liability companies. I find practicing attorneys don't really understand what corporations and liability companies mean. I had one attorney working for me, and I didn't not in much litigation, but we were suing somebody, and she prepared some of the complaint, and she names an individual besides the corporate tenant. The way they named that person, he signed the lease. No, but he signed as president of the corporation, and couldn't get it through her head that the separation, the corporation is a separate and distinct entity, separate and apart from its officers, directors, and shareholders. It's very important that you understand that. Insurance, real estate is all encompassing, as one of the point that Brian made. Insurance is important to understand. Bankruptcy law, you won't necessarily always get involved in it, but if it also has aspects of taxation, it also has aspects of property law. So it's not just your course to start with real estate in it, a lot of other things also involved.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm actually interested in both affordable housing and corporate real estate. And I know, there are a lot of similarities. It sounds like there's similarities. There are also some differences. I was wondering if you could speak to whether it seems feasible or whether the skills in one field are transferable into another and vice versa.
My opinion is you have to be competent. You have to know basic real estate law as thoroughly as possible. You have those issues are there. I mean, you should be able to. You should be able to do both. You can't do both, and you can't do either one. I also represent. I forgot to mention. I'm allowed one private client. It was an entity that was created by Enterprise, another former not-for-profit client of mine, called LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. And the City of New York asked them to create an entity to serve as interim owner, take title to properties that came out of in-rem tax foreclosure. The City of New York changed the tax foreclosure proceedings in 1926 or so to permit titles are directed to a third party. And because of timing constraints, the city realized that no one in their right mind would want to take title to these properties. So they asked these two entities, former clients of mine, to create this entity, which we did, and which I incorporated and solicited them today. I'm in bankruptcy court now. I'm in federal court now for the first time. I'll be admitted next Tuesday. The form contemplates somebody as an associate of a big firm. And of course, everything out and explain. I've been practicing for 20 years. What you need to know, there's no limit to what you need to know and what will be useful. The skills, whether you're representing Donald Trump, or representing the very poor, you need to know the same thing. You won't necessarily get into high finance, but it's what you do. Because one of the main means of finance for affordable housing today is the sale of low-income housing tax credits. And it's high finance. I don't understand it myself. Right, but it's being very complicated. And whether you're floating bonds to fund a casino or to fund a low-income housing project, you need to know high finance.
What sorts of internships or what kinds of internships would you recommend they apply for?
I'm sorry,
What kinds of internships would you recommend they apply for in preparation for graduation and actual practice?
Well, obviously, I think the kind of, I'm not that familiar with what kind of internships are out there, but I think, you should really look at the ones that are going to give you the most practical experience. I mean, that's the key, and also, an area that interests you as well. I mean, because that's a thing you'll take the most away from in terms of, what you're going to learn the most from. I would just be active and thoroughly investigate them before you make a commitment and make sure. I mean, there are a lot of great not-for-profit organizations out there that are doing the kinds of projects that Alex is talking about. Organizations that I've been involved with from the lending side, where a bank will be working as a partner. Banks, will want to make a lot of money from the private sector, but they'll also, it's important from the public relations aspect, and also a federal regulatory aspect, that they do that they participate in the kind of affordable housing projects. So there are a lot of organizations in this city that do that kind of work, and I'm sure do have internship opportunities.
I work with a number of banks, including some of Brian's clients, Citibank, Chase, JP Morgan Chase, Washington Mutual, Fleet, who are very heavily involved in development of housing, affordable housing, usually in partnership with the city. The city will lend money very cheaply, and banks will lend money maybe a little bit below what they would normally lend it out, get CRA credits, Community Reinvestment Act credits. Out of the 70s, there was a big push on the federal side to put pressure on the banks to reinvest in the communities in which a lot of their depositors live, and the depositors also live in poor communities. You go to Fulton Street, you go to Fulton Road, the Bronx, you go to the Hub in the South Bronx. It's a hotbed of retail activity, and there's a lot of money spent there by people that so-called in the city, and the banks have been really responsible. They also, these major lenders also buy loan housing tax credits. So the major investors in those housing investments.
When you began practicing, what type of specific assignments did you work on in real estate practice, and how long did it take until you began to feel confident that you could do these without someone supervising you or whatever it is?
Well, in my case, as I said, I started out in our residential real estate area, which is, as I said, a very high volume, repetitive practice, where an attorney can be doing, on a busy day, can be doing 3 or 4 closings per day. The time I started in 1993, it was the height of another refinancing boom, and we didn't have a lot of time to get trained or get acclimated. So basically, you sat in on 1 or 2, maybe 3 closings with an experienced attorney, and then they handed you a file and said, okay, you've seen what to do, and you go and close it. And it's very intimidating, but really, I kind of believe that is one of the best ways you learn, is you have to go. I mean, fortunately, we do have staff around all the time who can assist you when you have a question, but hopefully you're the type of person that will be observant and will know how to spot the issues. I mean, that's what you're doing in law school, but you need to do the same thing in a closing. You need to focus on what are the important issues that are coming up the table, and learn what's a big deal and what's not. Really, for our practice, it's a matter of weeks before people are up and running. Now, again, these are on smaller residential deals, but I'll tell you, the people sitting across the table, the borrowers, this is their home you're talking about. So, and the bank really is just as concerned about this loan as they are about a bigger loan, because at the end of the day, if this loan goes bad or there's a problem with the title, someone at the bank has to answer for this. So, although it's a little deceiving that you think, oh, it's a $200,000 deal, something like that. Bottom line is, somebody's life is involved in that, and maybe more significantly than a corporate deal. But that's the type of thing where we cut our teeth on, and you do get a lot of practice, repetitive practice, pretty quickly. And fortunately, it's good because it builds up your confidence. And at the end of the day, a residential closing, the concepts are very similar to the things you're going to run into later on a more complex deal. So it was a very good training ground for me.
I had a little more experience coming out of law school. The in-house practice I didn't have, and different nuances involved. When I was in Buffalo, I used to do research to land records, so I knew what deeds looked like, knew different forms of deeds, I knew mortgages looked like, forms of mortgages. So I had that spun in my belt. It took a short while. See, the firm I worked for initially, I also worked there 2 years while I was in law school. So by the time I was in practice, I was pretty well schooled in the nature of their practice, and I sort of hit the ground running. It was to the point where, after 3 years, they wanted me to partnership because the money was so great. Really good on the practice you bring into. One thing I learned is you got to read. You got to look at things and pay close attention. Especially when you're just getting out of practice. The things that you'll see, sometimes experienced attorneys will not see. I'll give you an example. I worked on the Warren Street project. I looked for being get ready for the closing, the forms you need, and one of the forms order to record a deed in the city of New York to fill out the real property transfer return, the RPT return. I look at this thing, I'm reading fine print, it says something about an exemption for exempt organizations, deeds to and from exempt organization or exempt from tax. Oh, I don't know that. I don't know anything. So I mentioned to my boss, he was running out to a meeting, I said, you aware of this? He said, no, you're wrong, you're wrong. So he went out to the meeting, and I called up the number that I saw in the form, and I questioned the person. So you're right, if you're a exempt organization, you can show us you have 501c3 status, with sales tax exemption, and you would be, that party is a party to that transaction, either the buyer or seller, is then that transaction exempt. The boss came back, and sat down with them and threw it, oh, is that right? Using that, we structured a number of deals, including New York City Housing Partnership deals. They began 83, 84. If you ever close a partnership deal, you look at the RPT that's delivered there, there's a letter of exemption addressed to me. They retained us at that time to apply for their exemption from the RPT. You had established, it is a method you could apply to them, and they'll give you a letter to attach each RPT. So it won't be a question of when it's cold. We structured a number of deals in ways to reduce closing costs. We have a mortgage tax in New York State, and it's particularly onerous in the cities. Outside the city, it's a point in the city, it's anywhere from 2 points to 2 3/4 points for loans above $500,000. Certain types of entities are exempt from the mortgage tax. Corporations formed under Section or Article 11 of the Private Housing Finance Law, called Housing Development Fund corporations are exempt from mortgage tax. It's an express exemption, Section 577. In closed Warren Street deal, I did something I'll never do again. We had a permanent lender make the loans to the HDFC, the corporation that was developing those houses and selling them. And then we had buyers assume the obligations under the loan. In other words, the note and the mortgage was signed by the HDFC. Moments later, we transferred property subject to the borrower's provision in the deed, assume the obligation, inside it also, assume the obligation of the mortgage. Thereby, avoiding mortgage tax, and reduced the closing costs significantly. I would never try that again, because since then the state is much more sensitive to tracking that kind of thing. They say that this is a scheme devised to avoid paying tax. You're right, scheme devised to avoid paying tax. Save the closing costs. And if you ever say I said that, I'll